Welcome to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. Manchester City win the Carabao Cup and the kid with the Manchester dialing code tattooed on his arm is the hero. 2 goals from City's academy graduate Nico O'Reilly secured victory against Arsenal at Wembley, but will the result have an impact on the Premier League title race? Tottenham Hotspur are stunned by Nottingham Forest in the relegation battle 6-pointer. Are Igor Tudor's days as Spurs manager numbered? And after another miserable day for Liverpool, Newcastle and Chelsea, is patience among supporters reaching breaking point? I'm Gregor Robertson, and joining me in the studio today we have the Times senior sports writer Alison Rudd, the Times London football reporter Gary Jacob, and making his first appearance in the studio of the season, the first for ages, it's the Times Manchester-based football writer Paul Hurst.
Thank you. Oh, what a lovely welcome.
That was a nice welcome.
Is that why they have the red carpet outside as well?
Yeah. Great to have you here, Hursty.
Cappuccinos today for you.
Down south.
Hursty, you were here for the big final last weekend. This might sound like a strange question to start with, given that it was cup final weekend, but it was a huge weekend of football on many levels. So I'm going to start by asking you all which result was the most significant of the weekend for you. Alison, I'll start with you.
For me,
it was
it's Liverpool's,
a personal view.
Liverpool's defeat.
Surprise.
Well, no, for grown-up reasons, I think a lot of people got carried away with the performance against Galatasaray. Galatasaray were not very good, and their star player broke his arm, and it was just a mess of a performance from them, and they don't have any European pedigree away from home anyway. So, but the idea that had arrested all the problems at Liverpool was shown to be untrue by the performance at Brighton, which was much more like the performances against Wolves and Spurs. And honestly, Liverpool are not. They're not at it so often, and there's a disconnect between the manager and the players. I feel like when Liverpool do put it together, it's because they want to and they're feeling it, as opposed to any tactical tweak or inspirational team talk from the manager. I have argued Liverpool need a reset, and at the end of the season they should bring in Xabi Alonso. I just don't think Slot is going to be the man for the future.
Okay, we'll come to that. You
asked me the question.
I know, and that was a very good answer, but we'll come to that in a second after the show.
This is why you're here.
Hursty, go on. What was your...
I was maybe it's because I went to the actual game, but the Carabao Cup final for me was very very significant, I thought. I don't think it'll alter the outcome of the title race. I still think Arsenal will win it, but it will add, I think, a little bit of spice, a bit of life into the running in the title race, because City have got that psychological thing in their locker now that they've beaten Arsenal. So obviously they come to the Etihad in I think it's 4 weeks' time, and so they'll have that in their minds then. I think the title race was in danger of really sort of petering out a little bit, wasn't it? Real limping along to the finish. But now you've got players from City coming out and saying, well, we can smell blood in the water and all that kind of stuff. So it's given them belief that they can do it, or at least push Arsenal a lot closer, and there'll be those doubts maybe creeping into Arsenal's minds as to whether they can get over the line again.
Gary?
I'll probably go for the Spurs game.
Yeah?
I think Arsenal will get over the line. I've sort of said that all along, but I think after Spurs had 2 relatively better performances, I think yesterday was probably a big shock to their system, and it's sort of hard to know where they're going to go from here, what's going to happen to Tudor. I know we'll talk about it, and the bigger picture of them, and it feels like quite a monumental result in the weekend.
Okay.
Would you agree?
No, I'm going with the cup final, so I get to decide and vote, and that means we start with the cup final.
He didn't say that before we were on air.
Let's start with the cup final, because
Greg is in charge.
I'm in charge. It's the Nico O'Reilly final, and perfect timing. Hursty, you wrote about him before the weekend. A fantastic profile piece for him in the Times. He was a boyhood City fan. As I say, he's got 0161 tattooed on his arm. Turned 21 a day before. This was a remarkable day for him.
Yeah, no, I probably should have put a couple of quid on him scoring. He's quite sagacious, really. But yeah, no, he's the original idea for that piece that went in the paper on Saturday was, I said to our editor James a few weeks ago, he has been the most consistent player for City this season. That's obviously been the problem with City as a whole, that they've had ups and downs within the squad, the players. There's no real player that's been consistently good apart from O'Reilly. I know he had a bad game in Madrid against Valverde, but every City player did. And yesterday just really summed him up. It was just, the guy, he's starting at left back. He's coming up against Bukayo Saka, who really didn't get much of a sniff today. And we were saying, weren't we, in the first 10 minutes, every Arsenal attack is going down the right. He's kind of they're always targeting that area.
Do you think they sensed a weakness there?
Probably because they thought Ake coming into the team was a weakness as well. But maybe with O'Reilly as well. Maybe they've seen what Valverde had done to O'Reilly. But he didn't really have much luck, did we? We were saying in the second half, that the early chance where Trafford made a couple of good saves, but then second half he ends up popping up, Fox in the box, with a couple of goals, and that just sums his season up. He's everywhere. He's athletic. He's strong. He's really creative, and throughout his time in the City Academy, he's played defensive midfield, centre midfield, number 10, right wing, false 9, and he's just such a valuable player to have in your squad.
There's a great story in your piece as well about when Pep saw one of his coaches in a restaurant before he made his debut. I think it was a Salford he made his debut.
Yeah.
And he said he's playing tomorrow. I'm playing him at left back.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, what? It's kind of real surprise.
Yeah, he was Ben Wilkinson, the under-21 coach, and he was out in the same restaurant as Pep, and he said, oh, by the way, Nico O'Reilly's starting tomorrow, his first start. And he was like, oh, great. Wilkinson, big fan of O'Reilly's. He brought him through the academy and just assumed that he'd be playing in midfield or, as a number 10. And he said, no, I'm playing him at left back. And Wilkinson was like, all right, in Pep we trust, kind of thing. He rarely gets it wrong. And to be fair, a left back against a Man City left back, a Pep left back against Salford City, he's not going to be, retreating, to the edge of their own box. He's going to have a chance to get forward. And he's made that position his own now. And you look at the England options there aren't many, are there? So he's probably put himself in pole position for that.
But is he too flexible for Thomas Tuchel? Like, Thomas Tuchel hasn't got Trent going, partly because partly, not all entirely, but partly because he does pop up in other positions than fullback. Mm-hmm. Do you think O'Reilly could be? Is that what Tuchel wants from his left back? To be someone who suddenly pops up in the box? You called him a fox in the box. He was the left back.
Yeah,
I don't think he actually knows what he wants, because he tried. He's obviously played Miles Lewis Skelly in some earlier games in his tenure, and he did step into midfield. So I think, and the thing with Nico O'Reilly is he can do both.
The best thing about Nico O'Reilly, from what I managed to understand from talking to his youth coaches and people at City, was that he absorbs any kind of information that the coach gives him without a problem. So if Tuchel wants him to stay sat in that left back position, he'll stay there. He will, he's got that temperament. He's not going to be bombing up and down unless he's told to do that. So I think he can do whatever Tuchel wants of him. So I don't think that will be an issue. And just coming back to the point about versatility, I know what you mean. Sometimes you can be too versatile, can't you? Where you think you don't get pigeonholed in one slot. But I think particularly in tournament football, where you get injuries popping up everywhere, and you do want someone who can sort of fill it in different places as well, don't you? If you are going to go far in the tournament, you're going to have walking wounded by the end of it.
Alison, I mean, obviously O'Reilly was the difference, but do you feel like on the balance of play in this final overall, City were worthy winners?
Oh, absolutely. One team looked. We can diss the EFL Cup final as being the Mickey Mouse Cup, can't we? We do tend to think of it as the lesser competition, but Arsenal looked quite nervous about the whole prospect of the first step of the quadruple, and it meant what you saw was inhibited football. Whereas City, who have won it like a billion times, aren't scared of the competition. They're not scared of Wembley. And there's something in the air about Pep, whether he's going to stay or go, and whether it means more. Every result just seems to mean more this season. So they were enjoying themselves. They were aggressive. They were fun to watch. They were going for the win in any way that they saw possible. I mean, when you rely on wingers, that's always going to give you an exciting match. I felt Doku and Semenyo were excellent and playing with freedom. And the contrast with Arsenal was, oh well, let's try and keep this quite steady and defensive and rely on set pieces. And they withdrew into themselves. And they in the second half, I felt they were bullied in an attractive way, not in an overly
Attractive
physical
bullying.
way, but they were bullied in terms of personality more than anything. And it from that start of the second half, you felt it was only going to go one way. So if it hadn't been Nico O'Reilly, it would have been somebody else.
What do you think about that, Gary?
Yeah, I thought they started off quite well. I thought Arsenal, and like Hursty said, they were attacking down the right, and they got in a few times, but they couldn't. There were a few things they couldn't get through City's press. City's press was very good in the centre. When they went long, Gyökeres wasn't good enough to kind of outpace City at the back for pace, and his control wasn't good enough. And Hincapié's booking, Hursty and I were saying, Hincapié's booking for a silly challenge, a rash challenge in the other half. Then just before half time, Semenyo gets in a couple of times, and you felt there, and you see Calafiori warming up, you felt like there the game had slightly changed because both goals came from that side. Hincapié he's on a booking, he can't do anything, and he's having a tough time against the guy. And I actually thought Arsenal weren't going to consider relatively comfortable at the start of the second half until that mistake from Kepa.
Okay, let's talk about Kepa then.
But I think there's some bigger issues with Arsenal about he's built a team of physical athletes, but they don't have a Bernardo Silva. They don't have a guy who can tip-tap in the centre. Declan's not like that. Zubimendi's not like that. Odegaard maybe when he plays, but he's not totally. He's more technical. Marino's could be technical.
Is he injured?
Yeah, Eze injured. So it feels like in that sense they haven't got that sort. He built a team that probably will win the league through winning enough the games he has to win. But in a one-off game against a team who's got that a little bit more, and Saka really, his form has not been good last season. He had 2 players on him yesterday, but in a space somewhere else, and they never used it. I think Timber was a big miss because Timber against O'Reilly would have been a better match than White. White likes to get forward. He never got forward yesterday in the same way. He likes to kind of dovetail alongside Saka. I think that Timber injury was kind of a bit of that physicality against O'Reilly would have been interesting. But you also saw when Calafiori came on, he did what O'Reilly did. He got forward and he had one header and he created one sort of chance, and it feels like Arteta basically was risk averse. That's his big thing. He's risk averse. He doesn't want to take the risk. He doesn't want to go for it. And they sort of had a team that was perhaps, like Alison said, hoping on to kind of stay 0-0 for a period of time and nick something. And frankly, their corners, which have been saving them this season, weren't good yesterday. We were saying, weren't they? They didn't clear the near post.
There was a hilarious moment at the start of the second half where they won a corner. And I've never heard a corner cheered so loudly by the fans. It was like they scored a goal. I think it was Havertz was winding the fans up as well, wasn't he? But geeing them up. But I was just like, if that's in your mind, that that is your best chance of scoring, that you've got no kind of plan B. I mean, you really become over-reliant on it, don't you? You do become risk-averse.
Well, it could certainly sort of shift your thought process about how much risk to take. Absolutely.
The Man United game where they lost 3-2, they were actually playing for corners, to get a corner. They were getting stuck trying to break them down. They were playing for, sometimes they will kick the ball off the opposition to get the corner.
Kepa, though, you mentioned him fleetingly. I mean, that was the moment that really changed the balance of the game as well.
Come away from Friday press conference with Mikel, I didn't think he wasn't not going to play Kepa because that was the message that came to me on Friday. Kepa's playing, so he never said it in those words, and you can understand it. He probably thinks if I take him out now, he loses confidence, and you can say all those things. After he argued that it would have been unfair and all of that. The problem is that Mikel isn't necessarily a man who's got sentiment, and he shouldn't have showed any. And also, he's a man who relies on fine margins, or small margins. He goes on about it all the time. And your small margin is your goalkeeper. And Raya has been the best goalkeeper in the Premier League for the last 2 seasons. Don't you think? He's superb.
Could it be contractual with Kepa?
No, he was asked a few weeks ago, have you given any promises? And he said, no, I haven't given any promises about the cups.
This is a manager though that he, at the start of his role, he spoke about the biggest thing he learned under Pep was that you had to be ruthless. And in the moment where he probably had to show a bit of a ruthless edge, you can say, you cannot totally take that argument about it's fair, it's the right thing to do. But if this, this is a mood changer.
Yeah.
If this affects Arsenal's running and their first opportunity to win a trophy in 6 years, their opportunity to go forward and win more trophies, more silverware, that's surely more important, Alison.
Yeah, but you rewind. The question is, why have they got Kepa as the backup keeper anyway?
That's a good question.
He's the most expensive goalkeeper in the world, and I think it's still hanging around his neck as a weight, to be honest, because when he's in the spotlight, he always seems to either make the wrong decision or make a gaffe. And that comes, he's clearly not innately a poor keeper, but he clearly has trouble with being on the big stage. If City had lost, would we be saying the same thing about Trafford being picked? If he'd made a mistake, you don't know. But my point is, maybe with Kepa you do, because he's had a succession of poor in the spotlight performances, and maybe the sentimentality came from Arteta believing he's had such an influence on him that he's going to rise to the challenge this time.
Yeah, just to make it clear to listeners, 2019, Kepa was part of the Chelsea team that lost on penalties to Manchester City, but the game was obviously best remembered for his refusal to be substituted ahead of penalties. And in 2022, they lost against Liverpool. He was the only Chelsea player to miss the penalty. He's actually lost. He's been a runner-up in 3 FA Cup finals and 3 League Cup finals.
I thought the thing that really got to him was not the mistake. It was that moment before when the long ball, he chased it. And Raya would have been already out of goal, would have dealt with that, would have come out, head out, no problem at all. He was slow coming out, got in a complete pickle. And I think that got into his head, really, for that. Because it was almost immediately after the cross. Was it?
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, that contributed to there was sort of an unease about Arsenal from that point onwards. And we've you talk about backup goalkeepers. City have always done that. Pep's always brought the backup goalkeeper in for cup competitions, and part of his argument is that person, whether it be Claudio Bravo or Zach Steffen or Ortega, they don't want to spend the whole season not thinking they're going to get a chance or play their part. They want to feel a part of it. But I do think when you get to the final, like you said, there's silverware on the line, and there's different
context in those clubs. Manchester City haven't gone so long without winning.
Yeah, I mean, Trafford should not be number 2, should he?
Well, Trafford was bought as a number 1, and then he very quickly changed as well.
Really, I mean, he spoke to us about that a few weeks ago. Trafford, he's clearly very unhappy about how that turned out. They signed him, and then hello. Who's this coming through a door? It's Donnarumma, one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Just wasn't expecting it at all for him not to be number 1. So, but credit to him, to Trafford, he made a few good saves, and his distribution's really good. He's really quick at getting out there, and that is one of Donnarumma's faults. I do think that he's probably got to move on, hasn't he, Trafford?
But Gary said that Raya's the best keeper in the league, and I think the main reason for that is the relationship he has with his team and how he fits into the team. So he sometimes plays like a sweeper. He's always talking to Arteta. He's always thinking about the tactics of them. He's not like a normal keeper. He's very, very involved. And you feel like he's part of the back line, not a keeper and the rest.
So that's a big loss when he's missing.
When he's not there, the relationship obviously doesn't exist. He's not there. And so there's a different pressure put on than the keeper who isn't normally in position, because he can't pretend to be David Raya. He can't. So he just has to resort to what he knows, which isn't what the rest of his team know. And I think it's really hard to have a backup keeper that you put in the spotlight when the person he's replacing is someone who's as unique as Raya.
I think the great thing about Raya this season is that if you look at all of his saves, they've been at key moments in games, and often if the other team has done nothing for Arsenal, had all the ball, and suddenly he's had to make a save. Even against Everton last week, Brighton, there's countless of them. So he just manages to keep his concentration all the time. And the other thing I think Arteta, when Arteta's saying after it's unfair to change it, it's like, well, if that was his view, why didn't you just say that on Friday or before? Why didn't you say make it clear he's my goalkeeper for all the way to the final, he's my goalkeeper for the FA Cup all the way to the final? He hasn't said that. So even he's either playing a game, or even he's not totally sure which way it's going, because if you make it clear, no one's asking. You've got it out of the blue. Someone even said to him the other day, well, you played in a final for Arsenal where Wenger changed the goalkeeper. What was that like? And he batted that off. What's it like to be in that team where suddenly your goalkeeper is completely different from one you normally play with?
Well, the upshot is suddenly, Arsenal's procession doesn't look like towards the Premier League title, doesn't look quite so straightforward. I mean, what do we think this does, if anything? I mean, 9 points clear, City have a game in hand, and they play each other on April 19th. It doesn't look as straightforward as it did before this final. Yeah,
no, there will be a psychological advantage that's gained by winning this game for City, but I do think they will drop points, City, before the end of the season. I just can't see them winning every game. I think there is a certain element of inexperience in some parts of the squad. Whether that'll change after yesterday's, it remains to be seen. Pep always talks about that. He said the first time you win a trophy, you can see players grow as a result of it. They become more mature and more confident after experiences such a day. So maybe that will happen to him. But I do think, particularly, I don't know how long Ruben Dias will be out for, but he's a big blow with. If he's out for a while, they've not got Gvardiol as well, and so there are a few question marks. It'll add spice to it. I do like the fact there's a bit of, there were a few kind of moments where it almost kicked off yesterday, didn't it? And there is a real kind of tension. Yeah, I think we do want to see that in a title race. So we don't want to see it kind of peter out until the end. And
the next game is Keysling. Arsenal play Bournemouth on the Saturday, and
City play Chelsea
the day later. So you feel like if it's 12 points, even though City's 2 games in hand, but if City drop points, then it's probably if Arsenal drop points. At 85 minutes when Arsenal were 0-0 against Everton before City had played, it's swinging the other way. So, which way do you think it's going to go, Alison?
I'm not. I just as I think, every time I think City have got what it takes, they just suddenly drop points, and it's entirely what you say. It's just that they've got slightly too many inexperienced and slightly younger players.
A few of them are out of form as well at the moment. Even Haaland, I know he scored an immense amount of goals, and he grafted a lot yesterday. He played really well off the ball. He's really did a job for the team, but in terms of scoring goals, he's not in great form. Foden, I mean, one of my favourite players, he's just gone, seen him do incredible things down the years, has gone quiet, and he doesn't seem to have. Nico Gonzalez, another player who they brought in, who was going to be the rock of midfield, sort of gone. He's not picking him, and then Reinders as well. He's gone off the boil a bit. So it just depends on whether they can rediscover their form, or whether you've got the likes of Doku and Semenyo who grow even more as a result of Sunday, because they were really good. They were fantastic.
2 wingers and 2 fullbacks for City were very, very good.
Yeah.
Well,
and Mark Gahey comes back, of course.
Yeah, he's not a bad player, is he? Yeah.
Well, promises to be a fascinating few weeks ahead in the title race. At the other end of the table, however, a terrifying few weeks ahead for Tottenham Hotspur after a 3-0, what turned out to be a thrashing by Nottingham Forest in this huge game in the relegation battle. Alison, where the heck do Spurs go from here?
Unbelievable, really.
The goals they conceded. Igor Jesus with a free header, Gibbs White totally unmarked for the second, and then the stadium just seemed like it was in stunned silence when Awoniyi rifled in the third, and it's just like, and then Igor Tudor doesn't do the post-match press conference because of a family bereavement. That just throws more sort of confusion into the whole mix. What did they do now?
Well, I think
that's the board's reaction as well.
No, but if I did have power at Spurs and wanted them to stay up, I think I'd make a change of manager, because I'd really like to see the meeting, the debrief on this, the choices Tudor's making, changing the system. If you go into a club that are in a relegation battle and you're told your job isn't to think about what might happen next season, is not to think about whether you could be the long-term manager of Tottenham Hotspur. Your job is to save them from the drop. there are certain rules you follow, and that is to keep it simple and make sure everyone knows their job and work incredibly hard at it. He's changed the formation. He's changed the system. He's given on a plate after the Atletico game. He's given on a plate. Xavi Simons got the highest marks from the UEFA marking system. He was man of the match in that game, and he drops him.
He's an incredible player.
And he's a wonderful player. Yeah. So why? But is Tudor overthinking things? Why? There are so little glimpses of light in that Spurs team that surely the lift in confidence that game could have given you in Europe. Okay, you were knocked out, and Atletico Madrid were probably just riding the wave of the first leg and taken all that. But it's your job as the manager is to take that kernel of positivity and turn it into something, even if it's a lie, and you know that the opposition weren't really at 5-star level. You pretend that they were, and you pretend that was the building block for getting you out of trouble, and you build on it. And to drop the one creative player that everyone was relatively gushing over just strikes me as someone who's being a little bit perverse in his overthinking it. And once you've got decisions like that being made, you kind of think, well, this is probably, for all his... It was fated as a guy who had the new manager bounce quality about him. He's in over his head, and I just don't understand why no one else can predict what the lineup's going to be or where people are going to be playing. Don't get it.
Gary, do you think Spurs make a change? They've obviously got a few weeks to kind of stew in it with the international break. Obviously, as we said, the family bereavement is also like another added complication and potential factor. We don't know enough.
I thought last week he had you gave him a bit of hope that he could come through it with the couple of results. Now I think they're probably going to have to risk it. They can't risk it. I just don't know where the change is, and we've just been discussing it. If I say one name, I'll be clipped up, and then I'll just go. But if you were going to. Call up Roy Hodgson.
Hey.
You'll
have support in that corner.
I know, but that's what I know. I'm not available on Twitter, any Soyuz fans. But he's kept teams up. Yeah. He's good at making people feel $100 million, isn't he? As a human being, he's very good. He's done it, and he's not going to be asking for a long contract. And to me, Spurs need someone who's managing the Premier League. And all this Ryan Mason talk. He did nothing at West Brom. Fair enough, he's a former Spurs player, but he did nothing at West Brom. So why does anyone think it? So to me, it's got to be someone who's managing the Premier League, can get it. And I know there's been name dash about, but does anyone even know if he can get out of his garden and leave? Why would Marinakis let him leave? You know, how easy is that to get out of the legals? And even then, he'd probably want a long contract. I don't see how easy that would even be to do. Why not ask him? He's not managing 2 years. Why not make the call and say to him, and you got no great link with this club, but make us organised for, and he is the type of, rightly or wrongly, he's the type of manager, as you know well, as he could make a team organised, grind out a few results. I know I'm going to get panned for that, but I just don't see many options, and he is the only other option was Ralph from Southampton, but then he probably won a longer contract, and even then he's not managed again for a year.
Well, Roy Hodgson at 78 is a year younger than Harry Redknapp. But I mean,
it seems logical to me. I'd not thought of that myself, but I wouldn't say that as a bad move. Like you said, what they don't really need. What do they need? 2 wins, 3 wins?
Yeah. I mean, it's not as if West Ham are quite... West Ham have played okay without really getting out of the relegation zone.
Yeah, the best thing about Roy is that he does get the players, orderly. And
I don't think it's possible. I don't think he'd take it.
Not bothered.
No, I don't think he would take it either. But so then it becomes... would you give it to Redknapp?
Oh God, no.
Well, I think what you do, it's probably too late actually. But I think what Man United did is actually really, really clever. You bring in someone who is, beloved of the fans, has a history and understands the club in Michael Carrick, but you back him up with someone like Steve Holland, who's an expert number 2. very
but no one
good
can,
at
no
that.
one can name that
Spurs.
person with in
Yeah.
association
Who
with
is that?
Spurs.
Who
That's
is that?
that's the biggest glaring thing that you think Manchester United had a couple to pick from. Although we thought it was a bad idea to hire Ruud van Nistelrooy, he was in the top. There was Solskjaer in the past. They have a few people to choose from.
Who is
Spurs.
it? Oh,
Who
yeah.
do Spurs have? Do you mean Defoe in the academy? Ledley
He's
King
not-
because he's still
Ledley King.
associated
Yeah.
to the club.
It's not anymore there.
But if they have
JJ's not
help,
there.
if it's a team as opposed to
I mean, there's Klinsmann,
ego.
but I don't know if he's been asked. I mean, he's not managing the Premier League.
I mean, there is a genuine point about who would want to take it. They've not won a league game in 2026. They've won 2 of their last 22 league games. They're on this 13 league games without a win equals the second longest winless league run in their history. This record of 16 goes back to 1935. This is a historically bad season,
The
and a
alternatives is
team
that-
who's so fragile. Like you saw when one goal went in, they just completely clammed it. So good luck.
The alternative is if you bin the idea of changing on someone, you try to get someone now permanently. But that's going to only be De Zerbi, and whether he would do it, who knows? You're not going to get Poch, for many reasons, and probably Trump wouldn't be happy about it anyway. So it's Pochettino.
You don't want to do that, do you? You know what the repercussions are for that. Yeah.
Well, Spurs play Sunderland next away. Then they've Brighton, Wolves, Villa, Leeds, Chelsea, and Everton.
Do you see enough wins? I was looking at those. Do you see enough wins out of those?
Absolutely not.
they're all teams
So
either
again, Gary
something
Hill's
to
got-
play for or in good form.
Sunderland, Wolves, Villa, and Chelsea away, and they've got Brighton, Leeds, and Everton home. I mean, it's not all of those teams apart from Wolves are playing for something, and Wolves have been better recently.
Well, from Nottingham Forest's perspective, though, this was a huge one. It was Vitor Pereira's first league win as Forest manager, Forest's 4th manager of the season, this wacky season. But they really, their big players stepped up. And actually, you look at the teams and you think Forest have they have more quality. They have a better team than
They
Spurs.
look like a team. They look like a team. Look like they're playing for each other. There was a lot of camaraderie out there, a lot of self-belief, a lot of energy. That's all you can ask for when you're in a relegation battle, I think. And also, they looked like they were having fun playing in the stadium. Everyone loves going there. The fans love it. You can hear the fans. You shouldn't be able to hear the fans. You can hear the away fans. They're louder. There's something about the acoustics in that place that's badly designed so that the away fans are the ones you hear. Ridiculous.
And then the
West
goal.
Ham. Oh, sorry, go on.
I'm just going to say, this is another club with goalkeeping issues.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Vicario kind of not quite as vociferously, but booed again by his own supporters. I mean, these players' the confidence is absolutely on the floor. Hursty, can a manager lift them now?
I was going to say, isn't Tudor partly responsible for that as well? He just seems to have created a very negative kind of vibe in the whole camp, doesn't he? I was just thinking the way that he reacted to when he subbed Kapinski, not going over and comforting him, and when the players come off, they go over to him and shake his hand rather than he goes over to them and shakes their hand. And it seems a really bad atmosphere throughout that club at the moment. And like you were talking about clubs going there and wanting to win and like rub Spurs' nose in it. It's a bit like that with Man United countless times in the post-Fergie year when they've been struggling. Teams have come to Old Trafford and raised their game massively just because they think, oh God, we've got a really good chance of beating Man United at Old Trafford here. And that's clearly what's happening with Spurs at the moment. But the reality is they don't really have to raise their game that much, do they, to beat Spurs?
The bigger pictures is at the board level, you just don't know if they know what they're doing. Paratici was very keen to move Frank on a lot earlier. Maybe that was the right call. He's left. We've got Lang and Vinay there. I shouldn't say it. Spurs fans obviously are on Daniel's back about going, and Daniel Levy had many a fault, but he probably would have acted a lot sooner. People remember he got rid of Santini quite early on. He made some decisions at manager which he needed to make. I don't know where you would go.
Well, the relegation picture now looks like Nottingham Forest moved 3 points clear of the danger zone. Spurs are sitting a point above 18th place West Ham, who lost against Aston Villa. I was at this game, and if there's any kind of hope for Spurs, it's that West Ham slipped back into their old ways in this game, very much so.
Why was that?
Well, they don't have Crescencio Somerville, who's been their best player since New Year, and they had suffered an injury to Jean-Claire Todibo, the centre half, in the warm-up. And remarkably, instead of putting Max Kilman into the team, who Nuno has worked with at Wolves, and he's not had a good time at West Ham, but he's an experienced Premier League defender. He played Freddie Potts and changed the whole formation. Changed from a back three to a back four, and the team looked all at sea, and Aston Villa were excellent, and it could have been 5-0 at half time. So yeah, I mean, if there is any hope, it's that West Ham's sort of renaissance was taken.
How long is Somerville out for, do you reckon?
They hope he's going to be back for the FA Cup semi-final against Leeds, and if not that, then the return of the Premier League.
So there's hope in that sense.
There is hope, yes.
That's been so integral to their resurgence.
Right, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Leeds.
I'm going to ask you one.
Go on.
Because also the West Ham goalkeeper, start of the season, couldn't deal with crosses first 3 games, and he was a Potter signing. Couldn't deal with crosses. They targeted him. Then they changed to Areola. Nuno obviously not been happy. He tried to get a goal. He tried to get Klinsky in January, but Klinsky wanted game time and wanted all sorts of things, and the Spurs didn't want to let him go. He's binned Areola. He's gone to Hermansen, and obviously people are now targeting him again. Where his weakness?
Well, he's been good in recent weeks, but in this game, certainly the second goal, it was a shot that he should have done more to push away to safety, and Ollie Watkins was on the spot to follow up.
What about the corners though, when they sort of tried to sort of balls in the air and anywhere near his bar?
Yeah, they definitely did target him, but Mavropanos, that's one bright spark. I mean, Mavropanos for his entire West Ham career has not looked good enough, and suddenly he looks like a man mountain.
Yeah. The Sassi's a big
yes,
part of that.
Yeah. So look, I'm going to try and put you on the spot because Leeds 0-0 draw against Brentford. They're really struggling to score from open play, Leeds as well. They're on 33 points in 15th. Forest on 32 points in 16th. Spurs 17th on 30 points. West Ham 18th on 29 points. Who goes down? Hursty, you first.
I do think Spurs.
You do?
With the way it's going at the moment, it's just like a sinking ship, isn't it? Unless they make a drastic change, and
no one knows what that change is.
Yeah, no, we debated it for a while, and Hodgson was the
left field choice. Okay, Alison.
I know it's fun to say Spurs because it seems so surreal that a club with that stadium and that history would go down. But I actually think, trying to step back from it, the team that looks less like a team is Spurs. So Spurs, the others in trouble. Even when they're in trouble, they look like a unit. They look like they know what their plan is. Spurs do not.
Gary,
I would say Spurs, but I do think West Ham at some point need to get level with them and out the relegation. So they had it the other week very briefly outside for like a day or something, and I feel like West Ham still haven't quite. They picked up a point, beat Fulham, picked up a good point against City. But I feel like West Ham somehow need to get parity or get, because Spurs in the relegation zone sounds a lot more severe than the threat of relegation. Isn't it? Obviously, that whole idea when you're below the line to above line, and West Ham have pretty much been below the line virtually all the season. So if they can get that head above thing, but I think. I don't know if West Ham got it enough in them to kind of get those results. That's the thing. And Leeds are the interesting one because they're not winning.
No, but they're still managing to go clear. Yeah,
but they
have the easiest running. But you're right. Every game goes by, and then towards the end, I think they have Spurs and West Ham.
They got
Spurs in the last 3 games, so they need to do it early.
They've got Burnley and Wolves coming up.
Yeah,
so they've got to go. But if you can get closer to them,
okay. Well, I would.
Who's your one?
Yeah, I said it a couple of weeks ago. I think Tottenham, because and I was at the Atletico game, and I thought, there's a bit of hope here, but
can we?
They're so fragile. They are so
tell
fragile.
Tom Warner that he's swapping to his Tuesday next year for the EFL podcast.
I'm not sure how he'd feel about that.
Tuesdays off, Tom.
I'm not sure how he'd feel about that. I did read as well that I think Leicester are the team to go down with the highest wage bill, 190 million. Spurs, I think, is 260 million. Right. So it would be, unprecedented stuff, but still a long way to go, so we shall see. Loads more to get into after the break. Break means quiz time. Which Premier League team went 11 games without a win this season and immediately followed that with an 11-game unbeaten run? Find out after the break. Welcome back to the Game Podcast from The Times. I'm Gregor Robertson alongside Gary Jacob, Paul Hurst and Alison Rudd. Before the break, I asked a quiz question And the answer is, Alison? Bournemouth. First team since Nottingham Forest in 1970 to follow 11 games without a win, with 11 games unbeaten. Courtesy of Bill Edgar, of course.
Of course.
We love Bill. Right, as I said at the top of the show, some huge results and some under pressure managers this weekend. And shall we start with Liverpool, Alison? Let's start actually with James Gearbrandt's piece in the Game today, which is really interesting. He referenced the fact that Liverpool have been outrun in all but 4 of their Premier League games this season. Brighton covered 116 kilometres to Liverpool's 108 at the weekend. Obviously, last season, Slot was kind of praised for dialing back the intensity, a bit more control to their play as they won the title. But it kind of, as James tries to sort of outline in this piece, it's kind of starting to feel that the intensity, this intensity is our identity motto, feels a bit more deeply ingrained than maybe we realised at Liverpool.
You mean without it, they're nothing?
No, that everyone's longing for it.
Well, yes, it has become part of Liverpool's identity. I think if you make the ball work for you and you're winning games, no one cares how many kilometres you cover. It's because you can actually palpably see that it's not helping Liverpool, that they haven't got the intensity. So they lesser teams with lower wage bills, much further down the table, are being made to look like Wolves are made to look like a really good team. Spurs, who we've just completely slaughtered on this podcast, were made to look like a team that were, at least, if nothing else, keen and full of energy and full of running. You can't. Brighton looked like world beaters simply because they were prepared to go for it. I mean, Brighton had the 40-year-old, 36-year-old, 35-year-old, and still running more. I mean, that is just pathetic. And I don't think I'm not saying it matters. These stats don't matter when you're winning, but they do matter when you're losing, and you can see that it's giving the opposition a real boost. That Liverpool are sluggish and not at it. I think the midfield of Liverpool is a real problem. Or do you remember? I don't think we praised a midfielder more than Gravenberch because of the way he adapted to the role. Just being able to control the midfield and give a sort of sense of stability to the team, grown-upness to the team. But that influence seems to have evaporated. McAllister looks like he's 52. He does. He looks like he's just wow. He just looks like his energy levels have just gone. It's self-inflicted because Liverpool had all this dosh and they chose to spend it in an area that they did not need to spend it. Liverpool needed to bolster midfield and bolster central defence, and they didn't do it. And now they're looking tired. And I know people don't want to hear it, but it's true. Grief is physically exhausting. So you can say, "Oh, life goes on. You've got to get over it." And it's terrible that Diogo died, but actually, you can think you're coping, but grief has, and the shock of grief has an actual physical effect on you for several years down the line. And I think that's one of the reasons they're not running fast. They just don't have it in them.
Is the upshot now, though, that Arne Slot is actually, fighting for his job?
Well, I think Liverpool fans are split on it. I don't think he's coming across terribly well. He's always looking for excuses. He's always giving excuses. He'll say that earlier in the season, the excuses were the style of football wasn't to his liking of the opposition. Well, that really doesn't wash. You can't say that. Teams will do what they need to do to beat you, and if it's not unattractive, so be it. I think he pulled out injuries this time around and scheduling, but that's always been a problem for the big teams. If you're a big enough team, you're going to be in Europe and you're going to have a lot to deal with. So that's really not an excuse either. I found him quite defensive as a personality when his things haven't been going for him, and loitering on the horizon is Xabi Alonso. If I'm completely honest, and maybe it's not a good idea to be completely honest on a podcast, but I'm going to go for it. If Xabi Alonso was not an option, I might be trying to argue that Slot deserves more time, but it's so seductive to me that Xabi Alonso's there. Because I think Liverpool need a reset, and it's not it's only partially Slot's fault. I think he's got a lot on his plate, and I don't think, if you look back at his CV, he's really got the resources to call upon, the experience to call upon, to deal with all the things that have gone wrong. I think the team are in a strange place, defending the title with the tragedy, and a slightly a change in formation that hasn't helped their star players. So you've seen, I mean, Mo Salah, you could argue, won the title for Liverpool, and he's not been performing. That's partly because the system hasn't suited him, as well as his own personal drop-off in form. These are big things for a manager to deal with. And maybe Slot would learn from this season and come back next season with answers to the problems, and Liverpool might spend again. But I just feel it's so seductive that Alonso, he's got a young son who he calls his little Scouser, who's a Liverpool fan. He was adored as a player, such an intelligent player, such an intelligent person. His first foray into proper management was astonishingly good. Anyone can fall foul at Real Madrid because it's not a real place. It's just weird. So I think it feels like the weight of history says Alonso's there. In the summer, Liverpool could do with a complete change of philosophy and approach and personality, and someone with the connection to the club that Alonso had and Slot didn't have.
Okay.
Do you think it matters about where they finish in the top, the Champions League or not?
Well, it's precarious now. This is the thing. Aston Villa, obviously, Aston Villa's victory taking them 5 points clear of Liverpool. Liverpool are 1 point ahead of Chelsea. Got Brentford and Everton chasing behind them. It's very precarious for Champions League football.
Well,
does that matter?
But
quickly,
I think it probably might keep him in a job if they're in the Champions League next season. But if Villa win the Europa League and finish in the top 4, is it? Then 6 places go to. We have 6 places in the Champions League.
If Villa win the Europa League and finish in the top 4, then it could be 6 places.
It's possible for these clubs we're talking about.
Terrible getting a massive get out of jail free card. Yes. Yeah. Quickly, Gary. Danny Welbeck, 2 goals. 35-year-old, but unlucky not to be called up by England.
I think so, and because it's not just recently; he's been playing well the whole season, and it's a little bit of a surprise given that you've brought Solanke in and Calvert-Lewin, which maybe he wants to have a look at them. You wouldn't just take Welbeck and have a look at him at the same time. I think he offers something a little bit different. I mean, obviously Watkins has got tournament experience as well, and he did well. But Calvert-Lewin, would you say he's better than Welbeck on this season? You wouldn't say that, really, would you? So.
Ollie Watkins, another unlucky to be left out. We'll talk more about international football on Thursday and upcoming friendlies for England. Let's go on to Everton 3, Chelsea 0. We did a lot of Everton. Did a lot of Chelsea. Sorry, on Thursday's show. Let's start with Everton. Up to 8th, level on 46 points with Brentford. 2 behind Chelsea, 3 behind Liverpool. What do you think, Hursty? Could they gate crash the Champions League conversation? A remarkable achievement.
Maybe if it goes down to 8th, maybe. I don't think so. I think the Europa League's probably the top they can aim for, but I mean that would still be a remarkable achievement, wouldn't it? I just love. I've not been to that stadium yet, but it looks like a proper setup, and Moyes has just done an incredible job there, hasn't he? When they came to Old Trafford earlier this season, they won with 10 men. It was just like it was never in doubt that they were going to win that match, and when I saw the result from the Chelsea game, I just wasn't surprised either. It's just they can do that to teams when they're on their game, aren't they? So
Moy said this was the closest to kind of the Goodison atmosphere that he thinks it's been all season at the Hill Dickinson.
He's got quite a few players who've dramatically improved, and Garner has done excellent.
Yeah,
Dewsbury Hall he was very good at Arsenal last week. Endi's good player.
Beto getting a couple of goals in this game.
And Beto, if you go back 18 months, you're never quite sure what you're getting with Beto. It could be hit and miss. And Moyes he's just channeled what he's got, hasn't he? And he's just made it.
Get the best out of what
he's got. He's got the best. Yeah. That's what he did at West Ham. Yeah. What do you think, Ali?
And Pickford as well. I mean,
and Pickford.
God, another great save.
He keeps pulling them out of the bag now, doesn't he? Looking superb.
If we're questioning Everton's chances here, I mean, this seems like a race that no one wants to win. No one, everyone above them is stuttering and stumbling. Even Brentford. Why couldn't Brentford? Could Brentford do it, Alison?
Champions League, or Europe.
Why not?
I think
Why not
Brentford
Champions
are in a really, really good chance of making Europe, and maybe it would be more sensible for them to go into the Europa League first rather than the Champions League. I mean, it's step by step. But this is a crazy season, isn't it? And if you try and strip back, it's a crazy season because some of the bigger teams are inconsistent and have various problems. And the reason we're talking, I think, about Everton and Brentford is because they are two teams that are incredibly well managed and coached, very clear systems. Just even if they don't get the points, you still come away from both those teams thinking, well, I saw a consistent performance there. I know what they're about, and they weren't trampled upon or embarrassed. It just wasn't their day against a team probably with a high wage bill on the day or whatever. So I feel like in this crazy season, it would be nice if teams that are well run, have found their feet, and are coached by managers who, as we just been saying, instead of moaning about what they haven't got, just get the best out of what they have got. Igor Thiago, second highest scorer in the country. Why shouldn't a team with the second highest scorer in the country make Europe? Makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Who are you plumbing for? I think I'm going for Everton.
Well, Chelsea and Liverpool are very unconvincing, and as we say, there's a chance it's opened up even wider
Everyone
to 6
tripping
clubs.
over themselves, don't they? Everyone keeps.
So
losing.
in this season, I always say money tells in the end, and you get a club who come close. Nottingham Forest last season, for example, and they always fall away. But this season feels even more sort of unusual because of, as Alison said, the inconsistencies, and it might be this season, even if it widens a bit further, that one of these teams does kind of stumble into the.
Yeah, but they won't be stumbling. They won't be stumbling. That's the point.
Well,
really.
they're kind of stumbling.
They're not. They're not. No, the unfancied clubs who might make it are doing it because they're not stumbling. They're being very grown up about it.
Yeah. Okay, Chelsea. Very quickly. They've only fielded players aged 28 or younger for 113 consecutive games. That's the longest stretch by a top flight club for 35 years. And Pete Russell's written in the game today that Chelsea are kind of sitting on a bit of a time bomb, perhaps, with their wage structure, and Enzo Fernandez, not putting out any, dampening questions about his future at the weekend. Are we getting to the point where there's a sort of existential crisis for the Chelsea project?
I would have thought it. Give players 8-9 years contracts, so it's never going to work, is it? I mean, it is a ticking time bomb, isn't it? When you sign players for, I know they're not doing that now. Obviously, they're not allowed to give that length of contract, but they were originally with Mudryk, was it? And Gary, was it? Fernandez 8-year contract. I remember talking to one of the execs at Man United about recruitment. Obviously, not a topic in which a subject in which they've been very good post Fergie. But they said that if you sign 3 players in a summer and 2 of them are hits, that's a good strike rate. You've done well there. So by that notion, if you're if you're Chelsea signing loads of players, you need 2/3 of them to be hits. But and that for that to be successful, to have an impact on the team. But if they're not, then that's they're going to be playing poorly, and you've got all these players on long contracts on massive wages. And
their model is about signing prospects, so it's probably going to be a lower hit rate.
What is it? What is their model? Does anyone know? I mean,
no, sign as many players as you can.
What is their model? And if their model is to sign young and polish up, Chelsea fans will go, hold on a second here, we've been winning trophies all these years. They haven't got a goalkeeper, they haven't got a centre back, and they haven't got a forward, and they spent £1 billion. I don't understand it.
Do you
understand it?
João Pedro's a good signing, and he's been
it's a good signing, but
Delap has been less impressive.
They lack a forward, they lack a centre back, and they lack a.
You look at the defence.
That's what Liverpool did, didn't they? They bought Alisson
and Van Dijk. That's how they won the title.
Arsenal bought a good goalkeeper. They've got a good centre back. It's very difficult to win.
No, I think a lot of the young players Chelsea have in attacking positions look very, very promising, and I think they will improve. And any club would be glad to be associated with them in a year, 18 months' time. But at the back, they are
Yeah.
It's a mess. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Neither goalkeeper works. And their choices for centre-back are all flawed. They're all inexperienced. Well, the ones like Tosin just doesn't seem to have settled at all at Chelsea. He never seems to give a convincing performance. And you need if you, and that's the idiocy of the project, if you like, is that I think you can have young attacking talent. I mean, if they're young, they're fast. It's not stupid. You can have it, but you need to balance it with a wise old head at the back.
Okay, well, another manager under pressure is Newcastle United's Eddie Howe after a 2-1 defeat against Sunderland in the Tyne and Wear derby. Simple question: Are we at the stage where Newcastle are going backwards? Hursty?
Not going forwards, are they? I'm really surprised by them this season. About how I didn't think they'd struggle as much as they have done. Obviously, losing Isaac was a huge blow for them. You got to struggle to recover from that. The recruitment, the replacement of him with Voltemade, Visage hasn't worked out, has it? So that was the ultimate boo-boo, wasn't it? You that's a really bad starting point for the season. But I still didn't think they'd struggle as much as they have done. Every time I watch Harvey Barnes, I just think what a brilliant player he is. He can create something out of nothing, and they've got quite a lot of the talent. He runs quite deep in that squad. They should be in the top 6 for me, or pushing to that kind of area. Even though they have lost Isaac, there's sometimes with managers you think they've just run their course, haven't they? And I think we're getting a little when they kind of the clubs become a little bit tired of the manager becomes a little tired of the club and the fans sort of, because there's noise, isn't there, at Newcastle now that the Newcastle fans aren't happy with him. And
we saw that at the end of the game.
Yeah, I just think he might come to a conclusion this is where he says I'll shake hands and move on, basically.
Then they got one question to answer, haven't they? He's like, is Eddie the man for the reset or not? And if he's not, then you make the change, don't you? Because there's noises that at least 3 players may be on Tonali. There's noises about Anthony Gordon. There's noises about Livramento. So if this is going to be a summer of noise, and look how they dealt with it last summer. They waited a long time to sell Isak, didn't they? And it was I don't think they particularly dealt with that situation very well. So they've got to decide early, right? If we're going to have a reset, is Eddie the man to do it? And if they don't think he is, then they have to make the change. If they think he is, you've got to back him and make the changes early. But I think, he said waiting to the end of the window, wasn't really.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily hindsight, because history showed you that with things like the Berbatov deal many years ago to Man United and all the problems Spurs got into. You make your decision early, and because if Liverpool are prepared to do that deal or that fee early, make the decision and get your ducks in line. And by the way, we all know deals don't happen over. There we go. There's a deal happening.
But
we all know. That's the boss. But we all know that deals don't happen in the summer, do they? Happen. There's 6 months' work gone into it. So clubs know 1 and 2 windows in advance what players might go, or even more windows. So this could have been done at the start of the summer, right? With cool time, we do, and I think they've got to do that this summer.
None of this is Eddie Howe's fault.
None of this is Eddie Howe's fault, but they've got to decide this summer what are they going to do, and is Eddie the man for the reset or not? And not let things drag.
I think Eddie Howe's done a really
He's got
good
a brilliant job.
job.
A brilliant
really
job.
Good job.
I think it's a brilliant job.
Considering all the negatives she just outlined.
They're not negatives about him. They're about the club. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I think
there is negativity building about him.
I think he's done a brilliant job.
Yeah.
I think he's done a brilliant job.
What you're saying there about Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes, agents clearly putting stuff out there. That smacks to me of a sort of a club that's hasn't got a control on its dressing room. And that is probably not Eddie Howe's kind of fault. When they get to that, when a club's in that situation where 2 of the best players are clearly wanting out there that they want to leave. I mean that really, it's a bad look, that, isn't it, on the club? So the club have really got to get hold of that situation, haven't they? Because losing those 2 would be terrible for them.
Questions are good.
Yeah. You don't want to become that club that where just where players just jump
Stepping
ship.
stone, yeah.
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you? I mean, would you say to Eddie, here you go?
I think they're really lucky to have him.
But then you would back him for the reset and say, fine.
If he's got the energy for it, I think it's a reasonable question to ask how long you can keep going like this, because it's an endless cycle of he does enough with them to get them into Europe, and then they look knackered when they're in Europe because they haven't got the resources for the juggling act of it.
Yeah.
And if I was him, I would be I'd find that very wearing, actually, and think maybe I want to go to a club where I don't have to juggle quite so much and get all this invective if we lose the Tyne-Wear derby.
Massive win for Sunderland, courtesy of Brian Broby's 90th minute winner. 10 years since their last visit to St James's Park in the Premier League, so huge day for Sunderland. Finally, Alison, you were at Bournemouth versus Manchester United on Friday night at the Vitality. This was a game that kind of swung on some pretty big refereeing decisions. How did you see them?
Well, I'm still to be at a game, and I almost want to be there because it will be the ultimate VAR moment when there's a penalty decision not given on the pitch, but the team who get away with it go on the break and score, which is what happened for Bournemouth, and
so
then they
True
bring it back.
Fair's push on Amad Diallo.
Ahmed, yes, but the referee lets play go on, and from that moment Bournemouth score. There isn't a break in play to go to VAR. But of course, we all know if VAR was to have decided that was that should have been a free kick and therefore a penalty, the goal would not stand. I mean, it would. Can you imagine what would happen? You've scored, and your goal isn't disallowed because of an offside or an infringement in the build-up to play. It's it's something that happened a long time ago in the other penalty area. I've yet to see that happen, and I wonder if maybe they're scared of that happening because it would be. It would be seismic. It would be seismic to say you've scored a perfectly legitimate goal, but we didn't pull it back for the foul in the box earlier.
I'm trying to think. I feel that might have happened to Tottenham once. Anyway, we'll think about it.
I haven't been there for it, and I want to know what that feels like if it happens.
I mean, yeah, we're going down a wormhole here, aren't we?
But it was
what do you think about the decisions, though, in isolation? Because a big part of this was that they were very similar. There was a pull and a push, and then Harry Maguire's. Do you think Harry Maguire's was the right decision?
Yeah, I think Harry Maguire's was the right decision.
Rugby tackle.
It was. It's exactly what it was. It was a rugby tackle.
I don't know how they can complain about
and it was
that.
a bit. The foul on Ahmed was a little bit more subtle, so there was some difference.
I mean, yeah,
there was some difference.
I don't know what was going through his head. Does he? Because immediately when the referee shows him red card, he's there pointing. Oh, you didn't give that one at the other end. It's like, well, just because he didn't give that one doesn't mean he gives you a license to push your player over like he's going for the try line. It's just
United are making
crazy.
A formal complaint.
Yeah,
yawn to PGMO.
What does that actually mean?
We've had enough of this, haven't we?
Yeah, but you dress up in a dinner suit and then write it. Send it by so a butler turns up with a plate, a silver plate, things like that.
We're making a formal complaint.
Makes it even more.
Notwithstanding all of that, though, I remain impressed with United under Carrick, and I would give him the job full time.
Steve, we've got you on as well. I mean, what's your view on the Michael Carrick situation? Because obviously there's echoes of the past with Solskjaer, but this is also a new period in the club's history. Yeah. What do you think the right decision is?
Solskjaer, I think, is a complete red herring, really, isn't it?
Okay.
If you're, just because he was, they did that with Ollie before and it didn't work out, it won't work out with Carrick. And I also question the idea that it didn't work out with Solskjaer because some of the best football, post Fergie was under Solskjaer, but they do want to be winning things. That's that's what they want to be doing, winning Premier Leagues again. And I think they'll end up giving it to him. I personally would. He's steady the ship. They're winning matches. They're not blowing teams away. But when do we see the whole first section of the show and how boring that first half was? Arsenal, Man City. You don't really see teams blowing other teams away that much, and I just think he's, who else are you going to get now? You're not really going to get an elite level manager, right? You're not going to get Luis Enrique out of Paris Saint-Germain, who's probably on an absolute fortune. You know,
A lot
That's
are
the rumour, though.
A lot are
There
tied
is a
up.
rumour that could happen.
you started. You're starting it now. I mean, they should have gone for him the first time when they gave it to Ten Hag. He wanted it then, but he said, "Oh, well, you've got to wait until after the World Cup, which is obviously in November at that time." And it was ludicrous not to even consider him for that because he's such a good manager. But I just don't think United have that kind of pull now, do they?
I just think they do have pull, because imagine
They don't even have
if
the
you were
money
the
now,
if you were the
yeah.
person to bring them back to their glory. That's so
people have fallen into that
irresistible,
trap,
isn't
haven't
it? Well, they'll continue to do so.
Yeah, but money's a big factor as well. You can't say if you're going to Luis Enrique this summer, and he says, right, Diogo Dalot's your right back, and he'll be like, oh, all right. So we need a new right back, and who's your left back? Oh well, Luke Shaw played brilliant this season, but he can't play 2 games a week. Whenever he has played 2 games a week, he's not looked good. So we have to sign a new left back. By the way, we're going to get rid of Casemiro's going. Fair enough. So we need at least 2. Ugarte, who you got rid of from Paris Saint-Germain, just can't pass. So we have to get rid of him as well. There are a lot of changes that have to be made in that squad. If you are to make it a competitive team in Champions League and in the Premier League and Champions League, obviously they're going to play more matches next season. It would be great if he has got that desire to do that, Luis Enrique, and kind of get buy into the project. Then fair enough, but it's such a massive step down for me now to go from PSG Champions League winners maybe 2 years in a row to
But it's boring, isn't it? The rest of the time, if you're not the Champions League, it's boring in France. So,
Well,
Premier League's fun.
sounds like it's Michael.
It's boring, isn't it? You just said it's boring.
Sounds like it's Michael Carrick's job to lose. That's put United 7 points clear of Chelsea in 6th. So Champions League football looks well assured at least. Okay, that was a jam-packed show, guys. We'll turn our focus to international football and England's forthcoming friendlies on Thursday. Hope to see you then.